Madison. Well, yeah, we gotta read the poem first. We're representing Professor Johnson's Lang 120 class that fortunately does not start at 8 a.m. but 9:30.
Which is still early.
Still early, but not bad. Sorry. Do you guys want to start with the poem? No? Okay. All right. All right. This is what we discovered. We decided to take excerpts of information that we learned through our infographics and our final research project. To start, Kate is going to walk us through the first few slides.
Okay, so a lot of people focused on the same thing from their infographic to their research project. I don't know if any auntie did this, but what she did research was very cool. I don't know if many of you guys know this, but in the 1950s, middle class and upper middle class families moved out of the city and into the suburbs because they can afford it, leaving minorities and poor people in the cities to fend for themselves, basically. So the quality of life went down a lot. This is the opposite. The middle class and upper class people are coming back into the cities, pushing the poor class people out. And in her project, she focuses on how that happens in Asheville. I don't know how many have apartments here, but the cost is pretty hefty, and that's why. And she focused on what policymakers can do to support these lower class people, which is provide affordable housing, which is tough to do here. And Wayne Morley focused on capital punishment. He did do the same thing from his infographic to his research project. For his infographic, he focused on the negative aspects of capital punishment. Most people are proven to be innocent later. It's cruel. People are more likely to be euthanized is a bad word, but that's the one I'm going to use, depending on their race, their social, economic standpoints, and things like that. And for his research project, he focused on the evolution of capital punishment throughout the United States. Not all states have abolished this yet, but they're working on it, and that's what he focused on.
Our classmate Blake Little decided to do his research on balancing hobbies and careers and why it's important to do that for mental health. On the left, as you can see, his infographic was on employment and happiness, and he started with fulfillment, which is the satisfaction one gets out of their job. And then he goes on to intrinsic motivation, which is engaging in an activity because you actually enjoy it. And if you lose value of your intrinsic motivation, then you turn into a workaholic, and that's just constantly overworking to just get a paycheck. And actually enjoying your job and your career translates to an increase in skills and skill sets that you can use for the experience and benefits. Benefits such as a paycheck and the experience should be more valued than the benefits in general, because it's what actually gives you joy and satisfaction. What do you work harder for? Something you care about or something you don't? Our classmate Madison Nalepa did research on the dietary guidelines for Americans that the government has issued and connects that to the increased rate of obesity, heart disease, cancer, and premature death. In her research, she identifies that the meat and dairy industries have significant economic and political power, and that they have manipulated dietary guidelines for their fiscal benefit. She illustrated her findings in this infographic. She connects her research to things we see in our everyday lives, such as the slogan, "Got milk," or "My plate, your fate." This is what she addressed in her research.
All right, secondly, our classmate Ruby Worthy, she focused on something that's important to all of us because we're students, the environment that students have when they're going through elementary school, middle school, high school, and up to the secondary education, college. She talks about the stress that we overcome or that we undertake pardon me. That's not what it was before. Something you might want to reflect on is our society has changed a lot over the past 100 years. Social norms have changed, racial acceptance, the variety of things that are different. But our education system hasn't really changed in the last 100 years. It's always been in the classroom, 30 other students, everyone looking in the same direction, everyone learning in the same way. But in her research, she's proposing a more dynamic way of teaching and a more inclusive and, like I said, dynamic education system. She wants to have more support for the average student. Sorry, I know I'm mumbling a little bit, but in light of the increasing suicide rates, personally, I come from a school in Charlotte, and we had 4 students commit suicide in the last 3 years, and it is a very important issue to address because the mental health of the students nowadays is drastically different because the environment that we're in is a little cutthroat. It's like who gets the better grades, gets the best job, gets the best money, has the best living, like higher standard of living. So she found some very valuable things in her research that I think we should all reflect on as students and should maybe look into our own research if you think about it a little bit more. Secondly, Ruth Perez, one of our students in our class, decided to focus on drug addiction and how it affects young adults. She read several young adult novels that address this issue. For example, she read Dope Stick by Dean Myers. It's about a student who dropped out of high school who's predispositioned to become an addict due to his parents being addicted. And here's an analogy for that. It's if you take a loan, say it's $3,000, your interest rate after 3 months might be $10, and then 5 months might be $20, and then a year later it'll be $50. It compounds over time. If your parents are addicted to something, you are more likely to be addicted. If you are more likely to be addicted, your children are even more likely to become addicts. Down the family tree, it increases over time. And that's a serious issue and something that's not always addressed in education forums for young adults because it's important for us to recognize that. She hits on the fact that drug addiction can be triggered by relatives having addictions, traumatic events, or social or economic backgrounds and how that can influence their day-to-day life. So in other words, young adults tend to turn to drugs and they develop addictions because they feel like their problems are unsolvable. And whatever relief they can find, no matter what it is something that they're going to turn to due to lack of coping mechanisms that they haven't been able to build over time. And last but hopefully not least is my research. I focused on the benefits of listening to heavy metal. I titled it The Health in Headbanging. Heavy metal addresses difficult emotions that we all experience, and it helps us cope and mature, and when we have the tendency to put our feelings on the back burner. It's a abrasive way of talking about when you're angry or when you're sad. It helps you address these things that in society people don't really want to look at or think about. And so in other words, heavy metal is best fit to articulate complex social issues and express unconventional emotions that we all see. For an analogy, if you have a bucket, every time you get angry, you put those emotions in your bucket. Every time you get sad, you put those emotions in your bucket. And you always keep it behind you. You don't want to look at it, you want to deal with it because it's uncomfortable, and it is uncomfortable, but it's important to keep these uncomfortable things in your life. But anyway, with my analogy, over time, your problems get worse and the emotions get more aggravated and more enhanced. And because you aren't paying attention to them, you aren't building the skills to deal with them. Because you've never dealt with them, even as a child or as you grow up, when it gets to a point where you can't avoid it, you won't be able to avoid it because your bucket's overflowing and you're too angry and you're too sad to deal with things like feelings of betrayal and whatnot. And what I've found is that heavy metal gives you a safe medium to address these issues in moderation. You can listen to a song that helps you connect and articulate the anger you're feeling, or helps you connect to the emotions of betrayal or abandonment or whatever you're feeling at that time. For the second phase of my research, I made a website and I created 4 playlists. The first one was anger and hate. The second one was addressing sadness and loss. The third was helplessness. And the fourth was abandonment and betrayal. While these are entirely subjective, I listened to these songs when I was going through situations like that. My mother had abandoned me, and listening to music helped me deal with those problems and find a way to communicate those emotions in a healthy, safe way. Because if you let them build up, it's going to explode, and, you hurt someone, or you hurt yourself, or your reputation, things like that. So I learned a lot about how heavy metal can help you. And while it might be a little, oh, that's a little weird, maybe sit down and listen to some YouTube videos about heavy metal. Yeah. This is what we discovered. Thank you for listening.